Hi and welcome back to StoryChat. Today we are going to discuss the Iran war, which is actually in the 15th day today, and what it seems to be a two-day affair, probably the US and Israel, which unleashed this war on Iran, which was on the pretext of a preemptive strike. They possibly were thinking that this is going to be culminated in 48 hours, but all their calculations have gone down the drain. At the moment, this is the 15th day of the war, and Iran seems to be persisting. Now, what is the possibility of a contained nuclear strike on Iran to bring it down to its knees? Now, we understand that a nuclear strike is possibly the last resort which Israel and US would employ in order to bring down Iran. But we will today consider the historical and technical perspective of what are the possibilities of a contained nuclear strike on Iran. Now, Iran is basically using its leverage on the Strait of Hormuz to block down the trade routes, which is supplying the energy resources to the Far Eastern countries like Japan and South Korea, which are absolutely reliant on these energy resources, and has been targeting these fuel tankers as well as the US military bases in the Middle Eastern countries. This blockade of the Strait of Hormuz obviously cannot go on for an unprecedented time, and the US and Israel definitely will be pressurized to bring this war to an end. And in order to bring this war to an end, they would want a respectable exit from this war, which does not seem to be possible at this point of time. The US and Israel preempted this strike in order to, on the pretext of the fact that Iran is very close to building a nuclear bomb, and in order to wipe out the nuclear program of Iran, the Israel and the US came down and attacked Iran. Surprisingly, Iran has persisted, and for the last 15 days, it has continued its attacks on the US bases in the Middle East as well as on Israel. Now, if we consider the historical perspective of what is a possibility of a contained nuclear strike on Iran, we understand that the West has an history of ruthless pursuit of power throughout the world, starting from the colonies of Africa and South America all the way to India and Far East Asia. They have utilized whatever there was possible to bring down or subjugate the powers which have been useful to their colonies. Even to this day, we know that the French have assets in the Western African states, and they're continuously leaching out the gold and diamond mines in Senegal and Burkina Faso and so on. Also, the US is the only country in the world in the history which has an example of dropping a nuclear bomb on its adversary. Now, the Second World War, Japan was already retreating, and there was no need for initiating a nuclear attack on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but the US actually did it in order to flex its power of a nuclear attack. And basically, it wanted to set an example for the Russians that we are capable of to bring about such a catastrophe on our adversary, and so that they need to be careful. So historically, we understand that the West does not have any morals of not initiating a nuclear strike. That is quite possible. So this concept of preemptive strike was initially brought about by Israel in the year 1973, when Israel attacked Egyptian Air Force in the dark of the night and wiped out the whole Air Force of Egypt. This terminology of preemptive strikes has been going on, that the US was the one which actually preempted the Iraq, taking out Saddam Hussein. Also, they preempted the Libyan strike, taking out Muammar Gaddafi, and so on. They have been doing this across the world. We understand it is a common knowledge that the US employs assassinations, it employs regime changes, it funds revolts in countries which does not subject to its terms. We know that in the name of democracy, what has been going on in many of the African as well as East Asian countries. So on a moral compass, the US and Israel have the capability of doing anything, especially when it comes down to a nuclear attack on its adversary. Now, coming down to the technical aspect of what is the possibility of a contained nuclear strike on Iran. Now, after the initial strike of Israel and US on Iran, where it wiped out the tier 1 leadership of Iran, they went about strategically to decentralize their operations, the military operations in Iran. Now, there are 31 provinces in Iran, and all of these 31 provinces are operating at independent military units. So there is no central command in operation at the moment, so they are not waiting for a command to generate from the central command, and so that they are free to make a decision and they are free to attack whatever assets of their enemies which may be in access to them. So a contained nuclear strike would not bring about an outcome which is probably US and Israel want, because it's a very big country. The whole province are scattered all over the place. The US and Israel are not sure exactly what are the locations of these missile depots and where are they being fired and what are the mobile launchers capable of doing. They do not have a specific target which they would probably attack with a contained nuclear strike. Technically, that makes it impossible to bring about any results from a nuclear strike. Now, in case if there is a nuclear strike, we understand that the other powers, the other global players which are watching this war from the periphery at the moment, obviously which is China and Russia, they would be forced to intervene in this war, because a nuclear attack would be something that has a far-reaching effect on the global scale. And if China and Russia are brought about into this war, this obviously will become a World War III. And from there onwards, where it would go, how it would unfold, nobody can predict. So the chances of a nuclear attack is very minimum at the moment, but we do not know that if this war goes on for like another 3 months. So on technical grounds and the implications of such an attack, we do not see that there is a possibility that the US and Israel are going to attempt a contained nuclear strike on Iran. But how this war ends is something that at the moment nobody is able to predict. We understand from history that USSR was probably the biggest military complex in the world for the fall of the Berlin Wall and before, when USSR was a superpower. And we know for a fact that USSR had a military of 5.3 million strong soldiers. There was 32 divisions of army posted in Vietnam during the Vietnam War. It was probably the strongest, both in numbers as well as capabilities. It was the strongest military that ever existed at that time. But it was brought about because of the stagnation in the economy of USSR. It was not able to fund its mighty military empire. It was not able to fuel its tanks. It was not able to fuel or maintain its jets. Eventually, they had to bring down those 5.3 million down to 2.5 million in 1989. It is very important for a superpower to be able to fuel its huge military complex. And if you're already under $38 trillion of debt and you are engaging yourself in an unending war, it will have a fallout which probably nobody can foresee. It is very interesting to recall what Nelson Mandela said in January 2003, and this is what he said. Back at that time, I think Bill Clinton was the president of the United States, and although the words of Nelson Mandela are so befitting right now, so suited to the present scenario, that actually these words come as a surprise. But the lack of imagination, the lack of preparation, the lack of intention, and the lack of planning by the US before coming into this war is surprising. A superpower which has been so well managed till this point can actually make a mistake like this. So this is it for the moment. Thank you for joining Story Chat. Please do subscribe and like, and we'll come back with a new story.